Hello everybody and welcome to Flame's Pyro Art Tutorials for Beginners. Today I thought we'd have a look at flowers and how we can show depth with a burns. So what greater way to show depth than is a flower. As we know, I've just took a simple image of a flower. Flowers aren't flat, are they? They have great shapes and different darknesses of shade where there's less light coming to different parts of the flower. So I thought today we could try and have a look. Let's see if we can create some depth to this flower that I've transferred onto this small circular piece of wood. I've sanded the wood first so it's nice and smooth, and then I've transferred my image. So let's try and make a start. There is a thing in pyrography called negative burning. So let me just adjust the camera a little. And what negative burning is burning outside of the shape that you're wanting to show in your artwork. So at the moment I'm using the Optima medium space shader. I've got it set on number 3 at the moment, but we may have to reduce the heat of that a little as we go. So to start with negative burning, to make your burns look more realistic, what you're looking to do is burn behind the petals, and that will give your piece much more depth than if you were to just burn straight onto the petal. There was a thing taught to me by one of the great YouTubers, Daryl Tank, and he had this quite simple mantra: where there is less light getting to a particular point, it will be darker. And if you keep that in the back of your mind at all times, it will help your burning greatly. So where there is less light, objects will appear darker. So that's just to start off with. I'm just negative burning outside of these petals, the outer petals. To hopefully help them pop off the wood. I see many flower burns and stuff in part of the groups I'm in, and although they're very lovely, people seem to struggle with the concept of depth, and that's what we're striving for all the time as artists, is to show depth. So I'm just burning on one side. I'm not burning both sides of the negative burn of the flower, as I want to cast a shadow from my petals. Okay, so let's have a look. There's going to be more shading here, isn't there, if we're carrying on with the concept of creating a shadow behind these petals. So I really enjoy burning flowers, and I started off in my early days burning roses, and they were a great learning experience, because a rose has got so many layers of petals going into its centre that you could really get carried away with trying to show the perception of depth. Let's turn this heat down a little now. Let's get it down to number 2. A little blow on it. So as we see, we've got the outer petals. We then have layers of petals, don't we, you know, building up as the flower. So again, one negative burn, these next layer of petals. Negative burning is a great way to really add depth to your work. So I've got the petal going across there. What I've got to think about is where there's less light, on the particular parts of this flower, it will be darker. So that petal will be sat over the top of the outer one. Again, at this stage, just blocking in some of the lesser detail. That we don't have to think too much about, just to create some early depth to our flower. Lilies, daffodils, roses are a great flower to practice this skill on. I'll start removing the graphite lines once we get some sort of shape and we can see where we're going with this flower. Hope all the new people to pyrography are enjoying the art form. It is a very therapeutic pastime, hobby, and as you practice, your skills will improve more and more, and you may look to want to take your art to the next level. I know I did. I started out just, like I said, as a hobbyist, just picked up the first pyrography pen, which was a really basic tool that burnt my fingers. I had to bind my fingers in pieces of leather to stop the heat from this like soldering iron pyrography tool from burning my fingers to a crisp. It was absolute agony. And then as I got more into pyrography, I discovered that you could actually buy better machines that weren't like these screw tip soldering iron types. So over the time I upgraded to one of the Japanese models of Amazon, which at the time I thought was absolutely superb. The amount of detail that I could get onto my work with this wire tip took me to a whole new level. And then as time went by, I found you could get even better pyrography machines, until I ended up with, in my opinion, the greatest pyrography machine on the market, which is the Optima. For those who haven't got an Optima, you will not believe the smooth glide and control that these pens give you. Any pyrography machine the quality of it isn't on the top end heat, it's at the low end. It's having stability of heat. When you have the heat turned down. With your cheaper models, they don't like operating at low temperatures, and you find fluctuations in the heat being transferred out of the pen, and you get the dreaded blob. What the dreaded blob is a blob of burn that you don't want. So when you hear people saying about the blob, That is something our pyrography artists don't want. And you'll find with the Optima, you don't get the blob. It runs very well at low temperatures with stable heat. Okay, so as we come into the centre of this flower, still negative burning at this stage, it's going to get darker and darker. As we get to the tight inner petals. And still at the moment just blocking in where we want to show the steps of the petals. Another good tip for everybody is always set your temperature off on a lower heat than what you're actually going to be finishing your burn at. Turning your heat down gives you greater control I see too many newcomers to pyrography that have the heat cranked up way too high. We've got a bit of graphite on the tips there. Yeah, they have the heat set way too high and scorch the wood, which isn't what we're after when we're creating realistic artwork. I'm just going to burn this just from imagination and just see where it leads us. Like I said, still at the moment just negative burning around the outside of the petals to give the perception of depth. It's a word you'll hear a lot from me, is depth. showing depth, finding depth. So this large petal, it's got one sat behind it, so in here there would be some shadowing cast to show that this petal was sat behind the larger one. So with pyrography, when you darken an area, you push it back. When it's sat next to a lighter area, the dark looks further back and the lighter looks further forward. But we can't just go dark to light. You have to blend the depth of the burn in to make it look realistic. Start removing some graphite in a minute. So this petal is going to sit over the top of this one. So again, we have a little darker area to sit that petal down, as this one's going to be much higher petal. Again, at this stage we're just looking to build depth. Negative burning. Got my heat just over 2 now on the Optima. So I can control the area I'm burning even better. I think this is some sort of lotus flower. picked it out because it's got a lot of petals. I thought it'd be a good opportunity to show you how we create depth. At the moment I'm just looking for places where I can add shadowing. To sit areas back and bring areas forward. In this case, to bring petals sat more forward and sit other petals further back. And just working our way around. The flower. In this particular area here where there's a small petal, we can go really dark in the little V-shaped crease. To really extenuate the fact that that petal sat further forward. You can still see me on the camera and the light's not glaring too much. I find it's good with pyrography to try and burn many different objects and shapes and themes if you're looking to really improve your skills. Every different object, like a car or a house or a person or an animal, they all have their own unique properties, don't they, when we're burning them, when we're creating pieces of art with them. So the broader the depth of your knowledge on different subjects will really help your pyrography go to the next level. Here again we have a smaller petal sat back. So on a principle where there's less light, it will be darker. We had some darkness there. we're constantly looking for areas how we can push things backwards and bring things forward. And you could just sketch out a basic flower freehand and just try burning it to see if you can make it look 3D. As I often tell many people, just draw a circle onto your wood and try and shape it so it looks like a spherical ball. That's a great lesson for learning about shading and depth. So we're still negative burning at this stage. Looking for ways to capture opportunities to show depth. Think about a small circular disc like this, it's easily moved around. In the very middle of this flower, it's going to be its darkest. So we can just block in dark centre. Okay, so this is where we had it started. When you think about shadow casting, it's all about just imagination and how you think the eye would perceive it. It's just trial and error. Just see what works, see what doesn't. Sometimes we'll fail and the piece of art we're working on will just be sanded off and started again. As long as we haven't burnt too deeply into the wood. You can just sand it out and start again. This is a piece of birch ply. In the UK, this is pretty much stock wood that most people burn onto with a pyrography. It's really cheap, easily available, and the amount of detail you can get onto a piece of birch ply is unbelievable. As we get into the middle of the flower, it's going to be darker because we're going into the deeper recesses. This pretty flower now, so you will be burning darker and darker as you go in. So one of the key skills to burning realistic flowers is negative burning. We can start shaping the petals once we've got a feel for what we're trying to achieve. And just find the rubber. There it is. Remove that one. And that line. As we go, we'll remove graphite lines. So with the graphite on, it appears to be darker than what it actually is. So once you're comfortable that you've got it in your mind's eye, the shape, take the graphite off. this particular little area here again, that's a bottom petal, but this one's higher up, so we can show more depth again by putting a darker shade. Remember the mantra, where there's less light, getting to a particular point, it will be darker. And that rule's always stuck with me, and it does apply to all art. This petal sitting over the top, so again negative burning, just very lightly at this stage, because we haven't added any shape to the petals as yet. So we're still looking for opportunities to push things backwards, bring things forward, to trick the eye into thinking that this is a multi-layered 3D object, or flower in this case. Again with a steady hand, this petal here is going to be higher off the ground than its one next to it. So we have to go darker. Let's have a look. So as you can see in the early stages, we're slowly beginning to get some depth to the flower. And I could show you a lot of these burns just with speed burns, but I want to show you them in real time. So you could hopefully maybe pick up one or two skills or see something that you could incorporate into your own work. And as I'm new to teaching, you'll find I'm going to waffle. We'll get better with time. And here's one petal that's going to sort of tip over. You know, we're not going to see the back end of the petal. Have it leaning downwards. And I could just spend hours and hours slowly building up any piece of art that I'm doing. For me, it's not a race. It's how you get to the finish line that counts. And we're always learning as artists. I myself am still always learning. You don't have to have a degree or a background in art to start making art of your own. If you have the time and the patience, anybody can become anything they wish to be. So we've got a good opportunity to shape this petal over. Again, negative burning. I promise you this will all start taking shape shortly. Where one petal sits over the top of its neighbour, we negative burn along the edge, and it'll push that petal back and bring that one forward. worry about the smoke, you see. I'm an e-cig vapor. It's not smoke coming off the wad. Gave up smoking some, what, 7 or 8 years ago. I was a heavy smoker. And then the e-cigs came onto the market. And me and my wife managed to pack in smoking from what were like 40, 50 a day smokers. Now we don't smoke. We vape, but apparently doctors say that isn't smoking, because it's just water vapour and steam we're blowing out. So if you see here, I haven't quite finished it, but this petal would sit over the top of this one. This has all just been done through imagination, not working off any reference picture. Sometimes it's good just to challenge yourself and just